Hi, I started a little early today because I understand there's a bit of a delay on the format that I'm using. And so I want to say welcome to episode 2 of Covey Cabin Productions. This episode I like to call, or I'm going to call, Mothers and Wives. Mothers because, of course, we've just passed Mother's Day. And some of us are missing our mothers awfully strongly, as I am missing mine. And as you know, with Long Beach Opera, I've had the good fortune to play a lot of mothers, a lot of wives. Just to refresh your memory on some of them, I played a mother in Tears of a Knife and Breasts of Tiresias. Do you remember those shows? Yeah. I was a very lovely mother in Thérèse Raquin. Madame Raquin was not a very nice lady. I played the Baroness in Candide, a small role, but a very zaftig role. I was Pat Nixon, of course, who was a mother. I was Marilyn Klinghoffer, who was a mother and a wife as well. I was Mrs. Williamson, that poor woman who was on the roof, the mother and wife, who couldn't believe her husband had disappeared. I was Lillian Disney in The Perfect American. I was Colleen in Fallujah. And I think you'll remember that very touching show. And then the most mother of all mothers, I was Medea in Medea. And so in thinking about mothers and wives, it makes me think about fathers and husbands. And it makes me think about the man who I have played the wife of, or the consort of, at least have been in many shows with, Robin Buck. And so I thought it would be fun today to bring Robin Buck on board, and let's have a discussion with him about making character and things of that nature. So here we go. Let's see if Robin Buck is ready. Robin, are you there? Robin? Robin Buck, please come in. We have a bit of a delay, as I was warning you about, but I think we'll be okay in a minute. Hang in there. Robin? Well, in the meantime, I can tell you that Robin and I have done many shows together at LBO, as many of you probably already know. And I hope you've seen some of them. Robin and I met a long time ago. We were trying to figure out when. And we actually can't remember when. There he is.
Suzan.
Hey, Robin.
It's good to see you.
Likewise. I was just talking about how we met and when we met, which I said we can't really remember, but I can remember our first show together, which was Cheryomushki, Moscow Cherry Town, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that was, I don't remember the year.
I can tell you, it was 2011.
2011.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think, well, we met in New York.
Oh, we did?
We were both working in New York and pounding the pavement, auditioning and doing opera at the Academy.
Opera at the Academy! Oh my God!
Yeah, right, right. We cut our teeth on really bizarre productions with Chris Alden way back then, before any of us knew about Long Beach.
Right.
So.
And then our first show here was with Andreas in Moscow Cherry Town, right?
Right.
Now you had gone for a long time. You were in Basel, weren't you, working there as a singer?
Yeah, after I worked in the States for quite a bit, and then in New York with City Opera, and then my agent said, "Okay, well, it's time to go to Europe," which was actually great because it coincided with a huge economic downturn here in the States when companies were canceling productions right and left. So, I ended up being in Switzerland with the opera company in Basel, and then other companies for about 8 years before
wow.
I returned to California.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So I know you, I think of you always as a consummate singing actor. And so I've started this um, live video to sort of talk mostly about, well, what interests me, which is character building and how through character we can help or give audiences a chance to experience things differently than maybe they would in their real life. And so, oh, look, there you are. Will you talk to us a little bit? That's Moscow Cherrytown, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is Moscow Cherrytown. But continue. I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
so will you talk to us about your process? Like, if,
Sure, sure. I'd be happy to. Um, so for me, whether it's a play or a musical or
Mhm,
an opera, I always begin with a text. You know, what has been written, what is just the information.
mhm,
Um, and then I try to figure out, well, why did the writer choose this particular um, word or this phrasing in order to express the thoughts of the character, um, and so I look at the text first. I also am aware of all the elements of language.
mhm.
With the, is it legato? Is it inherently a soft word or a short word or a long word or percussive? Because that's all part of what the composer is going to be reacting to.
In
So
other words,
then,
yeah. In other words, like the way maybe the word is onomatopoeic, or maybe,
yeah, exactly, the
mhm,
music
mhm,
of the
mhm,
words
mhm, mhm.
themselves.
And the
Um,
character's choices of those words, because it's the character that's chosen to speak in that way, whether it's bad grammar or colloquially or high grammar or yeah. Okay, gotcha.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sure you do this too, is part of the information gathering is, what do people say about you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What are your interactions with
Mm-hmm.
other people? How
Mm-hmm.
does that define you? Um, then I, of course, look at the music, because the music is in so many ways our subtext.
Right.
It provides um, context and subtext, and then I look at, well, is this spoken dialogue or recitative, or is it full blown um, emotional expression, which usually results in an aria or a song,
Mm-hmm.
the tune, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at all of that first before before having a point of view,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Aha.
Before the character has a point of view. Um, and then I look at the character, if it's something that is a character that is not real, then you have a lot of leeway, of
Mm-hmm.
course,
Mm-hmm.
in how you interpret that. Um, I also look at, for me, the physicality of the character. Are there physical uh, challenges in the character? Are there mental or emotional challenges in the character? Um, so for me, it's all of one,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, it's not an intellectual process for me, as I know it isn't for you.
What are you saying?
Well,
No.
I mean that in the best possible sense,
Uh-huh.
that it doesn't stay in your head,
Mm-hmm.
right? It translates. It translates. So you embody the characters, And I think that's our job as actors, as singing actors, is to also, we can't help but bring ourselves.
Right.
Finding yourself in a character. For instance, the classic example is, well, you don't have to be an axe murderer to play an axe murderer, right?
Right.
Or
right.
in the case of Telltale Heart, you don't have to be a mass murderer,
Right.
right?
Right. Or in the case of Medea, you don't have to have murdered your children, God forbid.
Exactly.
Right.
But we can all find that inner rage that exists in all of us, and then you put it in context of what the character is going through,
mm-hmm.
and find the empathy for that situation. So I know this is nothing new to you, because
no, but I think it's interesting for people to hear that there's a lot of process. There's a lot of process that goes into it, and for me, and I think it's probably the same for you. There's a lot of time that has to happen. There's a lot of, I like to say it's in the pot and it's stewing, and then
Right.
and then it comes out, and yeah, you can steer what you find. You can aim it directions as you learn more about the character in relation to other characters, like what I'm building in relation to what you're building, and how those two things come together and how that affects both of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In our work together, in every single one of the pieces we've done together, and it's been a lot,
Mm-hmm.
You're such an incredible partner,
Thanks.
both in the
Likewise.
rehearsal room and on stage, that, it's inspiring to work with someone like you.
Thank you.
It's inspiring to work with a great director,
Mm-hmm.
who brings something out in you that you had no idea existed.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the real excitement of the rehearsal process,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't think I've ever come to the beginnings of a rehearsal knowing, okay, this is the character.
Right.
I mean, we have the luxury of, multiple weeks in, as you say, in which the stews.
I was also thinking that in opera, as opposed to plays, so much is, well, the thing I would say is that the time that things has to happen is set because the music is set. And so all the background work we do, which as you're developing character may take you as the character time to reach from point A to point B. In the opera, it has to happen in this amount of time. And so the prep work is all that much more important, that you have already a kind of language or a world, that's not quite it either, but some way that you intersect with the character that you can adjust the time frame in which things have to happen.
Right. With music, there is a structure, right? It's like with film or television, you have to hit your marks.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no two ways about it. You have to be in your light. But it's even more complicated with music because, yes, everything happens in a particular space of time, and you're not in control of that.
Right.
There's an orchestra. There's a conductor. There are other people, right? So you have to really know your music inside and out. So you don't have to focus on that.
Right. So that's just a part
performing.
on the way. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what when I teach, I tell the students, it's like having a co-pilot. Part of your brain is in charge of all of the technical aspects. That would be the music, in time, dealing with the conductor, dealing with the lighting, props, all of the technical aspects. of not falling through the trap door,
Did that
of
happen to you?
hitting your marks. Well, I saw it happen to someone when I was doing Phantom. Phantom was rife with physical challenges and really dangerous situations with trapdoors and lifts that go up very quickly. And anyway, it was a great role, but lots of challenges that most people wouldn't think about, right?
Thank God. They shouldn't think about
Yeah,
it. If
absolutely.
we're doing our job well, right?
Yeah, you don't want them to be thinking.
We and the technical people, because God, that's total technical side. Yeah.
Right.
So I've been calling this episode I call this COVID cabin productions, as in it's COVID anyway. So I'm calling it Wives and Mothers / Husbands and Wives and Mothers, Husbands and Fathers, right? Oh, look, there we are. Yeah. So let's talk about the shows we did together. Oh, so that's Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Oh, tell about that show a little bit.
Well, it was an incredible show. I still have people, as I'm sure you do, come up to me and say it was one of their favorite things they've ever seen anywhere. I think that speaks to the power of the piece itself. There we are.
Oh, it's a little too big for the shot. Yeah, what a sweet picture of you.
And and the universality of the subject matter, dealing with some form of dementia with our parents or grandparents or our partners. It's just a fact of life. And so this piece was really touching on many levels. And I don't know about you, but I remember being surprised at how the audience reacted to it. Because of course we're in our moment. We're not thinking about the end result, what kind of result we're going to have with the audience. We're thinking about the reality of what's going on in our world. But I was really surprised and touched by that. And I know this is, for instance, with research. This is one aspect of research that was really important for me to do with colleagues in the medical school at UC Irvine.
Right, that was fortunate.
And on this particular form of Alzheimer's that the character had. And then how do you find your way into that world if you don't have any experience, with someone and it was a real journey and a real challenge to not show his frustration, because at the point in the opera where we're at, he is not in a constant state of frustration.
He is not.
He is not.
Right.
He refers to a couple of things that he can't do. For instance, I can't read music anymore. I can't play the piano. But in other ways, he's as sharp as a tack.
Right.
So he never, other than talking about that, he doesn't complain. He doesn't think he has a problem. He has found other ways to compensate for his inability to recognize people right? To recognize their faces.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it's only been the last few years that this this whole thing has really resonated with me personally because of my parents' journey in this horrible disease. So, but still, one of my favorite operas, and what a great opportunity to work with you. I think it was our first man-wife.
I think so too.
Coupling at Long Beach.
So this was based on Oliver Sacks' book by the same name. It was a case study of an actual baritone, correct?
Right.
Who had this disease, and Oliver Sacks, as the psychiatrist, I guess he was, swore he would never divulge who this singer was, thankfully, because I think that would have been inappropriate. But what was surprising, and I imagine it's quite factual given the way Oliver Sacks writes, that the character, the actual man, baritone, was able to function for a long time with the disease, and people didn't know that he had it. And it was a serious form of Alzheimer's. So, I mean, that in itself is amazing.
Yeah, it manifests itself as visual agnosia at the time that Oliver Sacks was seeing this patient, and ironically, Oliver Sacks developed visual agnosia, which means you cannot recognize people except for the memory of certain aspects, like somebody's nose or their lips or their eyes. So you can't put all the puzzles together, but you can see part of the puzzle and figure out who it is. And also, of course, relying on their voice. And one of the most heartbreaking moments of the piece is when he's asked to look at a photograph. And who is this? It's his wedding photograph. And yes, he doesn't know. He has to be prompted by his wife. Yeah. Ultimately.
So playing the wife of a character like this, I mean, I of course I don't have direct experience with anyone with Alzheimer's either, or this particular type of mental illness, but so all I could go with was the situation, right? And I think what I could rely on as the singer-actress was the relationship that you and I have developed as friends, and then to build on that to the relationship of the characters, and the relationship of the characters, to me, of course, is really what the piece was about, and the way that she was his advocate, emotional advocate, physical advocate. She stood up for him. She protected him from the doctor somewhat, and yet she was absolutely clear and knew what was happening. And so I'm sure we've all known people like that in our lives who it's not like they're blind. It's like they choose not to encompass the negative, but to always strive for the positive in a given situation. And I admire her because she's so strong, strong like a willow, not strong like a brick wall. Strong like, she can bend with it. She can take in stride all the parts that happen. So I always admired her as a person, if I can say that about my characters. Yeah, I can say that about my characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Robin, I can't imagine now with what you're going through. I mean, imagine if we got to, can I say that, do this piece again, and the different information, and
But I think, don't you think that's the same case for anything that you revisit?
Well,
you're a different person. 10 minutes from now,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Let alone 10 years.
Oh, I liked her so much better.
And so, you know, all we have is the now. And you know, when we are lucky enough to get the chance to repeat a show or a role, we bring something completely different to it.
It's pretty exciting, actually, I find, don't you?
Speaking of repeating
Yes.
roles, I think our next,
Oh, yes.
well, actually, before A Man Who Mistook His Wife, just after Moscow Cherrytown was our first difficulty of crossing a field.
Right.
Which is the other production that people talk about. You were so, I mean, first of all, Andreas's concept for this was mind-blowing.
Absolutely. Unbelievable. Yeah.
I know a number of professional directors who refer to that production as being so innovative.
So we should, in case people didn't see it, we should describe what it was.
Based on a short story of Ambrose Bierce, right? The difficulty of crossing a field is about the the disappearance of a wealthy landowner who, in supposedly full view of, and this is in the late 19th century.
1863, yeah.
1863,
In Selma, Alabama.
Selma, Alabama. That in full view of a number of people was out walking in his field and suddenly disappeared. And so the whole piece is structured like a trial. And the beginning and the end are really about Mrs. Williamson, who is sitting on a proverbial roof in the original production, literally the roof of the house that she cannot, by law, inherit.
Right.
Which is another mind-blowing thing. And her unraveling during the show is so brilliant.
So the set, as you recall, with the way Andreas staged it was, we were in the Terrace Theater, which is a 2,500 seat theater, I think.
Huge, yeah.
Huge. What do they call that? Where the seats don't have aisles, so it's like a whole row of seating, continental seating. And in this case, he put risers with chairs on the stage, which is where the audience sat.
Yeah.
And the curtain went up, and the audience looked out into this vast space of seats, rows of dirt there was fog pumped in there. It was this vast space. Floating across it was this plexiglass walkway. How long was that? 15 feet?
Oh, no. That was 50 feet
50,
at least.
Okay. And it was
it went all the way back to the probably 100 feet.
And lit from underneath. And then there was string quartet accompanied it, and there was a plexiglass platform floating out over some other area in the former audience area where the string quartet played, also lit from below. And then the family, the mother, Mrs. Williamson, her daughter, stayed in this area, one section of the orchestra pit, which went up and down, of course. So, right, the audience is on stage and the pit's going up and down. And then there was a third section of the pit where the slaves were, because of course it dealt a lot with slavery. It was pre-Civil War. And the slaves stayed in this area, third level of the pit, and also out in the fields. Really amazing use of space. Really amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And David Lang's score
Gorgeous.
incredible, very eerie, ethereal, haunting,
Creepy. Yeah.
creepy. Yeah. And I got to play two roles,
Yes, you did.
very different roles. The first was a fellow, was a neighbor of Mr. Williamson, who disappeared, and he gets interrogated by the magistrate, who is up in I don't know which balcony, one of a very high balcony. So very stunning visually, and this character just literally crumbles under the pressure of not being able to remember exactly what happened. And Andreas was so helpful with this character, so literally it just has a meltdown by the end, hanging on for his life on this plexiglass platform, and then just disappears.
Yep.
In stark contrast to this gentleman, who was the brother of Mr. Williamson, and he was in charge of the slaves. Fanatic, one of the greatest prolonged rants I have ever done in the theater, and both of these were not sung roles; they were just spoken roles.
I'd forgotten that. Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
And really phenomenal. Again, the direction, the use of space, the lighting, as you see here.
Yeah.
So the world. This is something else that makes sense. That the world that is created, the theatrical world that is created when we do a production, that has a big influence on
character development.
Character development as well.
It makes me think of how clothing also affects, at least for women. This will sound so silly, but whatever period your show is set in, women had very restrictive or not undergarments, and because of the way they affect your movement, it totally affects a lot about your character. Now, Mrs. Williamson was how she developed was very much affected by the fact that I'm sitting on top of a 12-foot ladder with a skirt covering the ladder, and I didn't move from that spot. And so she developed a lot of hand stuff, because that's what the actress could use to express. It was limiting and also really liberating at the same time. Sometimes so
your
extreme.
Eyes too.
Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see them in the picture.
Your eyes are so expressive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a role that has more in common with film or television work because it's so compact.
Compact, yeah.
And theater.
Yeah.
Because there is no movement. Although the movement that happened because of the hydraulics of you rising and then disappearing was phenomenal. And that really had added to the drama. That was
another. I have a lot of favorite shows at LBO. We have a comment here. Richard wants to know, what's the toughest role you've ever done?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. They're all a challenge. Boy. That's a tough one.
I can put something in here. I can say something that I know that we discussed, if you don't mind to talk about it.
Sure.
It was when you were doing Telltale, but that had to do with the technical aspect of how you were portraying the character. There you go. And how it was projected in front of you and what worked and what didn't work. And that was hard to encompass while you're singing that very complicated Stuart Copeland music. Yeah.
Thank you. I was thinking, from an acting point of view, that was also a challenge and a great catharsis.
Uh-huh.
Right? I mean, that character was so full of vile,
Yeah.
um,
Vitriol and bile.
vitriol.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I had I hate to say this, but I had someone very specific in mind
Oh.
that I um, really inhabited for a lot of that
That you don't have to
anger.
tell us.
No, I won't tell you. I won't tell you. But yes, the technical challenge of that, of the syncing with the visuals, because so much of what I did was, projected on these huge screens. And so it had to be very precise.
Right.
And while that was a challenge, I had someone who really helped me with all of the video direction. And that happens to be you.
Yeah. Well, so people know, I was the AD, I was the assistant director to Andreas for that. And so, yeah.
As I call you, the assistant director of the asylum. So,
that was a good piece. And now I want to skip ahead because our time is getting short, and I want to suggest that we talk about this piece. Hold on, I have to find it. Hold, please. This one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, can you? Oh, that's a nice clear picture. Yeah, so, Christopher Walken. No.
Yeah, that's right. One of my favorite roles. And a lot has to do with the work that I got to do with you in this. I mean, first of all, it's such a challenge to do justice to a real person, Leon Klinghoffer, and yet make it your own. And of course, the story is not perfectly aligned with what exactly happened, but oh my God, what an incredible piece that is! Yeah. So poetic.
Yep.
And until Klinghoffer is shot, all of the action that happened between us, it's very realistic.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The situation very realistic, and so that made it easy to react to what was going on. Everyone was so beautifully cast in that, so strong, and like Marilyn was in real life, you were his rock. It'd been paralyzed from a stroke, from actually several strokes, confined to a wheelchair, unable to physically protect himself, but willing to speak his mind against
wrongdoing.
Yeah. The terrorists, and then that wonderful scene that John Adams writes this ethereal music for after he's died.
So gorgeous. So gorgeous. Yeah.
It's. I spent a lot of time trying to understand that, trying to make real sense of that, and finally, I just gave myself over, as I'm sure you've experienced in some productions, that it is about the gesture. In this case, it's very poetic, beautifully staged, very simply staged, and haunting. So
you bring up a good point in terms of character, that as the performers of the character, you can't control, if you will, how the audience perceives you. So what they perceive and their reaction to what we do, that's their choice, but it's also their job, if you will. And I've had experience, I'm sure you have too, where I've played someone and I get exactly diametrically opposed responses to my portrayal of the character. And of course it's off-putting because you want everyone to love it. But then the fact that someone says, "Oh no, they never would have been like that." Okay, that's, that
right.
is an audience's prerogative to decide or how they will perceive it.
Well,
And
their own personal experience brings them
exactly.
to their reaction.
Interpretation, yeah. Right.
And
so when you're talking,
sorry.
what I was going to say is what you're saying, where you have to kind of give it over and not, you have to kind of give it up, as it were, understanding it, as it were, kind of, and it's just the gesture, 100%. Because sometimes those are the most moving moments anyway, because they do that mystery thing that we can't necessarily even talk about. That's what music does. I think that's where music
Right.
supports it. It goes beyond
words.
Yeah.
And the poetry of that libretto is so beautiful. Alice, forgotten her name.
So speaking of poetry, now, because I'm going to move us along here, talk to me about Voltaire. Talk to me about playing Candide.
Oh my God. That was such a blast, playing Voltaire and Dr. Pangloss. And, I was so happy that he had a scene with a wheelchair, by the way.
Right.
You were my nurse rolling me around, right?
Right, I was.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. I mean, such a incredible mess of a piece.
Yeah.
That I think we did our best to make sense out of it.
Candide's hard because there's so many versions of it, so many various libretti.
And we created our own version of it based on based on yet another version, and so I was happy with it. That was a lot of.
I found you hysterical in that part.
Oh well, silly, very. It was a lot of silliness. I'm trying to find him. Oh, there he is.
There's Pangloss. There he is.
Channeling David.
You mean right? Right. David Schweitzer, our
director.
Yeah.
David Schweitzer.
Yeah. Pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just one quick comment on what you're talking about as far as getting different reactions from the audience, and I think that's because you and I we focus on the moment, on the process. We're not looking for the product. We're not looking for the end result. We're not thinking about manipulating the audience that way, right? So there are performers that and maybe there are genres that's
appropriate,
important to focus on, but focusing on living each moment honestly. That's
what interests me in theater.
Hopefully, yeah.
I like watching it and I like doing it. So yeah.
Now, so you have this incredible voice, from top to bottom. One of the most beautiful and powerful voices
Thank you.
Anyone I've ever known. So my career has been based on not having the biggest or most beautiful voice in the world. I've been hired because I'm interested in the theater, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the acting of the roles. You are a prime example of somebody who has both this glorious instrument and a phenomenal actor.
Oh, Robin,
So you you probably don't think about this, but I certainly am aware that there are very few people who do both well.
Oh, thank you.
Kudos.
Uh,
And that brings me to my last. I was so looking forward to working with you
oh,
this
Billy.
past month.
I wonder if we can prepare something for this. Let's talk about that after this live, and maybe we can. I don't know. We have to check if it's legal.
Well, even to tackle some of the text, because
Oh yeah,
a phenomenal text.
yeah. Really.
So
Do you remember Gavin Bryars? I mean, I know you saw Marilyn, but we also did his Paper Nautilus.
yes,
Another
incredible.
amazing. Yeah,
At the aquarium.
At the aquarium with the fish that actually did the right timing. Haha.
It was beautiful.
That was also anyway. So I was so looking forward to revisiting Gavin's piece,
I've not
his
had
music
good
again.
luck with Gavin Bryars.
Oh,
And I say that only because I was originally asked to do the role of
in Maryland, right?
the director in Maryland,
Right.
and then had this awful accident
I
that
forgot about
put me
that.
out of commission. And now with Billy the Kid,
We better write him a note.
no, probably not, because I'll never get hired to do another one of his shows. It'll be I'll never get a chance.
No. So well, we're actually out of time. So now I guess we have to say goodbye. But maybe let's have you back again, and we can talk about when I get another theme going. So mothers and wives, husbands and fathers, and
outlaws.
Oh yeah. And so I will say goodbye to everybody here at LBO. And I wanted to bring up, Robin. When Robin and I worked together, I forgot about this. When Robin and I worked together, we would often meet at our office, and we actually still do almost at least on a monthly basis until the present situation, which is Islands Burgers. Now I can tell you that they do takeout, because my husband and I did that a few weeks ago, and as we're trying to encourage everyone to do, keep your small businesses supported when possible, with your takeout dollars, or your however you can support
and support
businesses.
LBO.
And please support LBO, of course. That goes without saying.
It's such a great home base. I know we're out of time, but I started my career with LBO.
Under Michael Malensky. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's incredible to have come back. Billy, I think, would have been my 16th production with LBO.
Yeah.
So such a pleasure always to see you and talk with you.
I'll meet you at Islands, except not yet. So I want to say thanks to everyone for tuning in. And next Wednesday, I'll post a theme, maybe if I can think of one early enough. Thank you very much.
People have right questions and ask.
Right, they can do. Please, if you have something you want to ask. I appreciate very much the comments. I appreciate you tuning in. And we'll say stay well and see you next week. Don't forget, tomorrow night, another Artist Afternoon, 4:00. Bye now. Bye, Robin. Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Suzan.